Before smartphones and social media swallowed up everyone's attention, being a kid meant actually stepping outside. Maybe it's different where you live, but around me you barely see kids biking through the neighborhood anymore, pulling harmless pranks like ding, dong ditch, or getting into that loud, chaotic fun that only seems to happen after dark. When I was between 9 and 17, though, I practically lived outdoors. A block from my childhood home, there was a park that became our unofficial headquarters, especially at night when our parents were tired of the noise. The park was ideal woods wrapped around 3 sides, the street bordered the 4th, and across the road was another strip of trees. No houses close enough to complain, no watchful neighbors ready to call the cops. It felt like our territory. I was about 13 when this happened, prime age for riding bikes everywhere like they were our only form of transportation. I'm pretty sure it was a Saturday. Earlier that evening, the 6 of us had biked to a nearby pizza place, then headed back to my friend Tony's house, which wasn't far from mine. We were hanging out in his backyard, laughing way too loud, until his mom came storming out with the classic ultimatum: quiet down, send everyone home, or take it somewhere else. 3 of our friends called it a night, but me, Tony, and our friend Rob weren't ready too. Instead of going home, we decided to bike to the park. It was only 5 minutes away, but riding at night felt different: cooler air, empty streets, that strange mix of freedom and mystery. When we got there, the park looked the way it always did: a small baseball field, a short set of bleachers, a few scattered benches, and a decent-sized playground with a swing set and a plastic slide. We usually hung out on top of the playground structure because it was elevated and partially hidden, our little lookout spot. While we were sitting up there talking, Tony suddenly froze and whispered, "Did you hear that?" We stopped and listened. Silence. After a few seconds, he said he thought he'd heard a footstep or a dull thump on the playground, something that definitely wasn't one of us. We scanned the area but didn't see anyone. A few minutes passed, and then we all heard it, a solid thud, like something shifting on the structure itself. That's when the mood changed. We climbed down, walked around the playground, and even called out, asking if someone was there. No answer. Nothing in the woods. No movement near the field. Trying to shake it off, we climbed back up and kept talking, convincing ourselves it was just the metal settling or an animal nearby. Then it happened again. Only this time it wasn't a thud. It was a voice, a child's voice, and it came from inside the slide. It was one of those spiral metal slides, the kind bolted onto almost every playground, where you disappear for a second as you twist down and pop out at the bottom. I'm not exaggerating when I say we completely freaked out. Yeah, we'd heard a couple strange thuds before, but we never heard anyone climb up, and those earlier noises definitely hadn't come from inside the slide. There's no way someone could have snuck in without us noticing. Trying to act brave, I walked over and put my ear near the opening. "Is someone in there?" I asked. A small voice answered, clear as day. "Hello." It was a child's voice, a little boy maybe, toddler-aged, soft and high-pitched. I'm almost certain that's what it said. My friends heard it too. We all just stared at each other, wide-eyed, like we were silently confirming we weren't crazy. We had been at that playground for at least 30 minutes. No footsteps, no giggling, no parent calling out. Nothing. I tried again. "Do you need help?" Silence! No movement, no whimpering, no shuffling inside the slide. At that point, my brain switched to logic mode. Maybe a little kid had somehow crawled up from the bottom and gotten stuck around the curve. So I climbed up the ladder, heart pounding, and pushed myself into the slide. As I twisted down, I braced myself to run into a child at any second. But I reached the bottom and it was empty. No kid, no footprints in the dirt, no sound of someone running off. I immediately circled the playground, scanning under the structure, behind the benches, toward the baseball field, even toward the tree line. There wasn't a single person anywhere. My friends climbed down and did the same. We checked every hiding spot we could think of. It would have been nearly impossible for someone, especially a toddler, to sprint off without us seeing or hearing them. We were already shaken, trying to come up with rational explanations, echoes, pipes, someone messing with us, when it happened again. From inside the slide, the same small voice. This time it said, "Catch me." That was it. No debate, no second guessing. All 3 of us took off at the same time, sprinting for our bikes like something was right behind us. We pedaled harder than we ever had, tires humming against the pavement as we raced back to my house down the block. My chest was burning by the time we skidded into my backyard. We huddled there, whispering and trying to catch our breath. We had to keep it down. My dad was probably already asleep, and the last thing we needed was getting grounded on top of everything else. We replayed every detail, searching for something that made sense. Maybe someone had been hiding in the woods. Maybe it was an echo from the street. Maybe we imagined it. But before we could settle on any explanation, there was a sharp knock on the backyard gate. Yeah, an actual knock. Not someone rattling the fence by accident, but 3 slow, deliberate taps, like she was politely waiting to be invited in. My stomach dropped. I called out, "Who is it?" expecting maybe my mom, an aunt, anyone familiar. Instead, a woman's voice answered, Cal, almost cheerful. "Hello." Then, "Were you boys just at the park?" The 3 of us locked eyes instantly. No one said a word for a second. There's a thin crack where our wooden gate meets the fence, just wide enough to peek through. I leaned in and looked. On the other side stood a middle-aged woman. She was already staring directly at the crack, like she knew that's exactly where I'd look. And she was smiling. Not a normal smile, a huge, stretched, almost exaggerated grin that didn't match the situation at all. It didn't reach her eyes. I jerked back from the gate. Every instinct in my body told me something was wrong. "No, sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you sure?" she replied immediately. Before I could answer, Tony jumped in. "No, we weren't." There was a brief pause. Then she said, "Okay, thanks anyway." But she didn't leave. I forced myself to peek again. She was still standing there. Same grin, same fixed stare through the crack, not moving, not turning away. Just waiting. That was enough for us. We backed away from the gate and slipped inside through the back door, locking it quietly behind us. We sat downstairs in near silence, completely rattled. The energy in the room had shifted from confused to genuinely terrified. Everything about that woman felt wrong. Her timing, her smile, the way she seemed to know exactly where I'd be looking. My friends were too scared to even grab their bikes from the yard, so they ended up staying the night. None of us slept much. By morning, with sunlight pouring in, it almost felt ridiculous, like maybe we'd overreacted. If we really stretch for a logical explanation, maybe there was a little kid at the park who ran off, and that woman was his mother searching for him. Maybe the voice in the slide belonged to him, but that theory falls apart fast. We rode home at full speed. No one on foot could have tracked exactly which house we went to. And we're absolutely certain there was no child anywhere on that playground. We searched everywhere. So what did we hear inside that slide? Who said, "Catch me"? And who was that woman smiling through the gate like she already knew the answer? To this day, it's one of those memories that never found a clean explanation. What started as a normal night hanging out at the park turned into one of the most unsettling experiences of my life, and I've never looked at an empty playground the same way since. I live in one of those small suburban towns where people leave their doors unlocked, neighbors wave from their driveways, and everyone swears it's safe to walk around at any hour. Nothing ever really happens there. That's what we all tell ourselves. It was a warm Friday night in the summer of 2018 when this happened. I had just clocked out from a late shift at work, mentally drained, and I didn't feel like going straight home. The park a few blocks from my apartment had always been my reset button. I'd jog there, walk laps, or just wander until my head felt clear. That night, though, something felt off the second I stepped through the entrance. The sun had set about an hour earlier. The streetlights lining the park were on, casting dull yellow circles on the pavement, but most of the main path was swallowed in shadows from the tall trees overhead. The air smelled like freshly cut grass, and for a moment, it actually felt peaceful, quiet in a way that should have been calming. I wasn't expecting company. On weeknights, it was usually just me, maybe a couple walking a dog, or a few teenagers sitting on benches talking too loud. I slipped my headphones in, music low enough to still hear my surroundings, and started down the main path. At first, everything seemed normal. A pair of dogs chased each other in the distance. A couple strolled by, laughing softly. It almost felt therapeutic, like I'd made the right choice coming out. Then the little details started stacking up. The first thing was a man sitting alone on a bench near the path. He wore a hoodie with the hood pulled up, even though the air was warm. He wasn't scrolling on a phone or talking to anyone, just sitting stiffly, staring straight ahead. I told myself not to overthink it. People sit on benches. It's a park. But as I walked past him, I felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. I glanced over, and he was looking directly at me. Not casually, not curious, just locked in. He didn't shift when I passed, didn't look away, didn't blink. My stomach tightened. I picked up my pace slightly, telling myself I was being dramatic. Small town, safe neighborhood, probably harmless. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps behind me. I slowed down. They stopped. I stood still for a moment, pretending to adjust my playlist. Silence. When I started walking again, the footsteps resumed, perfectly in sync with mine. My heart rate spiked, but I tried to stay rational. It could be anyone. Another late night walker. Someone heading to the same exit. Still, there was something deliberate about it. The rhythm matched me too precisely. I decided to change routes. Up ahead was a side trail that looped through a smaller, dimmer section of the park before reconnecting near the street. It wasn't as well lit, but it would shave a few minutes off my walk. More importantly, it would tell me whether this was coincidence or not. As I turned onto the trail, I glanced back. The man from the bench was no longer sitting. He was walking in my direction. At first, I tried to convince myself it meant nothing. Maybe he'd just decided to take a walk too. But the way he moved made my chest tighten. He wasn't strolling casually or jogging with purpose. It was slow and controlled, like he was keeping the exact same distance between us without making it obvious. I pulled out my phone and checked the time, then lifted it to my ear, pretending to start a call. "Hey, yeah, I'm almost home," I said loudly, hoping he'd hear. No reaction. He didn't hesitate, didn't slow down, didn't turn away. I kept moving, fighting the urge to look back again. My breathing got shallow. Every sound felt amplified, the crunch of gravel under my shoes, the faint hum of the streetlights, the steady echo of his steps behind me. I decided to test it. I broke into a light jog. A second later, so did he. Same distance, same pace. That's when the calm, safe image of my quiet little town shattered, and my mind started racing with every worst-case scenario imaginable. Why was he following me? Was he just some creep with nothing better to do? Or was I in real danger? Should I turn around and head back toward the busier side of the park, or would that trap me deeper inside? My thoughts were colliding so fast I could barely focus. Then I saw the street exit up ahead, the one that opened into a well-lit residential block. That was my out. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it was shaking my vision. My breath turned ragged, and behind me, those footsteps sped up too, perfectly synchronized, like he was pacing me on purpose. I refused to look back. Every instinct screamed at me to just keep moving. When I burst out of the park and onto the street, I slowed just enough to turn my head. He had stopped, right at the edge of the trees. He stood half, hidden in the shadows, just inside the park's border. I could make out the outline of his hood, his shoulders, his stillness. He wasn't catching his breath. He wasn't pretending to check his phone. He was just standing there, watching me. I don't know how long I stood frozen under that streetlight before survival instinct kicked in again. I ran the rest of the way home. My hands were shaking so badly I fumbled my keys twice before I finally got my apartment door unlocked and slammed it behind me. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was harmless. Maybe he just enjoyed creeping people out. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he was homeless and pacing the park at night. I clung to every logical explanation I could find because the alternative was too unsettling. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. A few days later, in broad daylight, I forced myself to go back to the park. I told myself I wasn't going to let one strange encounter take away something I enjoyed. The sun was high, kids were playing, dogs were running. It looked completely normal. I walked the same path, half expecting to realize I'd imagined the intensity of that night. Then I reached the bench. The same bench where he had been sitting. It was empty now, but carved into the wood were deep, rough scratches, letters etched hastily, uneven, almost frantic. I couldn't fully read what it said. Parts were smeared, as if someone had dragged their hand across it mid-carving. It looked intentional, but also like whoever did it didn't want it clearly understood. A chill crawled up my spine. I snapped a quick photo and left. After that, I avoided the park at night entirely. But what really unsettled me wasn't just fear, it was the feeling of being observed. Like my presence there had been noted, logged, remembered. I started noticing other things, too. Shadows shifting in my peripheral vision. A figure across the street that disappeared when I focused on it. A car parked on my block for days that I didn't recognize, porch lights flicking on as I walked past certain houses. Each incident on its own meant nothing. Together, they felt like a pattern. I told myself it was paranoia, anxiety feeding off memory, trauma playing tricks on me. But the image of that hooded figure standing at the tree line never faded. About 2 weeks later, I decided to try jogging again, early evening this time, while the sky was still bright. I stayed on the main road, nowhere near the interior trails of the park. I thought that would make it safer. As I passed the edge of the park, I made the mistake of glancing toward the trees, and there he was, just inside the tree line, almost blending into the shadows. Same height, same build, hood up. I froze where I stood. He didn't move an inch, but the stillness somehow made it worse. It felt deliberate, like he had been standing there long before I noticed him, like he'd been waiting, watching. My instincts were screaming at me to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. Sudden movement felt dangerous, predatory, so I walked slow, controlled steps, keeping my eyes locked on him the entire time. He never waved, never called out, never stepped forward. When I reached my car, I yanked the door open, threw myself inside, and immediately locked it. My hands were slick with sweat as I started the engine. As I pulled away, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him stepping into the street behind me. But he stayed at the tree line. And after that night, I never saw him again. At least, not officially. Because sometimes, walking through my neighborhood, even near my own apartment, I still get that same crawling sensation across the back of my neck. That subtle awareness that someone is just outside my line of sight, watching from a window, from behind a parked car, from the shadows between houses. I even checked into the park's security cameras afterward. I needed something concrete, proof that I hadn't imagined it. But nothing unusual showed up. No hooded man entering or leaving at night. No figure lingering near the trails. The sections I walked were supposedly covered. So either he knew exactly how to avoid them, or he was never caught on them at all. The strangest part is that he never spoke. Not once. No threats. No words. Just those synchronized footsteps and that fixed presence in the dark. It almost made it worse, because without words, there was nothing specific to report, nothing tangible to explain. I've told friends and family. Most of them think it was anxiety or that I spooked myself. And I understand why they'd say that. On paper, it sounds thin, but I know what fear feels like. I know the difference between imagination and instinct. This wasn't imagination. Since then, I avoid that park completely after dark. Even during the day, I stick to the main roads. But the memory doesn't fade. Sometimes late at night, I catch myself staring toward the direction of those trees, picturing that exact spot where he stood. Wondering if he ever moved. Wondering if he still chooses someone new to follow. I never reported it. There was nothing solid to give the police, no face, no details. Just a hoodie, a silhouette, and a feeling that he was always one step behind me. That uncertainty is what lingers. Not knowing who he was, not knowing why me, not knowing if it was random or intentional. Even now, years later, if I drive past that park, I sometimes think I see a shape near the tree line, a dark outline where the light fades. I can't tell if it's real or just my memory filling in the blanks. I don't slow down to check. I just keep driving. And I hope I never have to walk that path alone again.